Well, here we go again. Junior doctors are going on strike yet again. Junior doctors in England will stage a 4-day walkout next month, according to the British Medical Association, the BMA. They say they've issued a fresh challenge to Rishi Sunak. The medics will leave their post from Friday, August the 11th to Tuesday, August the 15th, as part of its next round of monthly strike action. Dr. Robert Lawrenson and Dr. Vivek Trivedi, now they are the co-chairs of the BMA Junior Doctors Committee, said it should never have got to the point where we needed to announce a fifth round of strike action. Our message today remains the same. Act like a responsible government. Come to the table to negotiate with us in good faith, and with a credible offer, these strikes need not go ahead at all. Now, we need to remind ourselves that the junior doctors are asking for a 35% pay rise, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. Joining me now, Stephen Dorrell, former Conservative Health Secretary. Good morning to you.
Morning, David.
What's your view on this? I mean, every time we speak, more and more patients are caught in this. We have all of these elective procedures, 7.4 million people waiting for elective procedures. It's getting worse and worse and worse. We've got junior doctor strikes, then consultant strikes. We then hear GPs are going on strike. Then we've got radiographers on strike. The whole thing's falling apart. And actually, it's the people who pay for the service. They're the ones that are suffering.
Well, as you rightly said, David, here we go again. And we've been going round this cycle, not just with doctors, but as you said this week, with radiographers, earlier in the year with nurses. The health service was always going to be under huge pressure in 2023 as the service sought to recover from the pressures of COVID. The last thing in the world the health service needs at this moment is disputes with its staff about pay and conditions. And yet this has been going on already for pretty much for a year. And so, as you rightly say, here we go again. The thing that I think is wrong is for the Prime Minister, frankly, to say we're not prepared to talk about this. This is our final offer. Now, we all know, everybody knows, that this will have to end in talks. So why is the government unwilling to settle down and discuss how this is going to be resolved? Of course, it's not going to be resolved by an immediate 35% pay increase. Everybody knows that too. Doctors are intelligent people. But there is a problem here, which I think the government has been extremely slow to address. And patients, as you rightly say, are the people who suffer as a consequence.
I mean, they're the group, the junior doctors, the ones that I have the most sympathy with. It's a really tough gig. And, you know, an FY1, which is the first year, gets 29,000. It goes up to an ST6 or 8, about 58,000. Now, on top of that, they do get additional payments as well. It's a very difficult job. And obviously, we don't have enough doctors. That's the fault also of the BMA. But the government has now announced their plan to double the number of training places for doctors. You were the Health Secretary. What would you do if you were still Secretary of State at the moment, given this, where you've got the medics saying we want 35%, which I think we all agree is untenable. You've also got the government saying, well, you're going to get 6%, I think they offered, plus £1,250 as a one-off payment. Clearly, they're poles apart. What would you do?
Well, the answer is I would find a way, and it's not my... The answer is you'd have to work out the detail, but I would find a way for the government and the other people who have an interest here, which is NHS managers, patient groups, and all the clinical professions, to address what is the fundamental problem here. The fundamental problem is that the pay levels, pay and conditions of people, clinical and non-clinical, but particularly clinical staff of the health service, have fallen back substantially over the last 15 years, which is not fair to those individuals, but much more importantly, means the health service cannot recruit and retain the people that it needs to deliver the services that patients want to see. Now, that's not an issue. It's an issue that's taken 15 years to build. It's not something that anyone can expect a government to put right overnight. But at the moment, the government isn't even willing to talk about it.
No, and as you know, the government's announced their 15-year plan, so doubling the number of medics from 7,500 to 15,000, that's the right thing. It was the BMA, of course, who originally opposed that, by the way. But just in terms of this, I do wonder also, and many of my friends who are medics also share a view that we're recruiting the wrong people into medical school. And I do wonder that, where it's become a rite of passage where mummy and daddy want you to be a doctor so you can say you can be a doctor, rather than actually, back in the day when it was about character and about not necessarily academic brilliance, it was actually about whether you wanted to care for people. And the reason I just asked that is one of the leading members of the union behind these strikes, Dr. Zain Khan, who is a militant member of the BMA, he's only worked for the NHS for less than a month, and he's already set up a website basically luring doctors out into the financial services sector. And that seems, I mean, it just seems totally wrong to me.
Well, I don't know the individual concerned, and I obviously don't know the website. There are quite legitimate things, important, valuable things, actually, for doctors to do with their clinical experience and profession that contribute to society as well as treating patients.
Indeed.
Doctors play an important part in the research which underwrites the development of modern medicine. So I don't think we should be seeking to victimise people who don't, having qualified as doctors, commit themselves to a full life of clinical service. But therein, of course, lies an issue. The majority of people who qualify as doctors, we would hope, would spend their lives treating patients. And the problem is that that isn't a sufficiently attractive career option to maintain the commitment of people, the vast majority of whom, when they decide to apply to medical school, they think at that moment, at least, that what they're doing is committing their lives to the treatment of patients. And as I've said countless times, the health service has a poor track record of retaining the commitment of people who join it in order to deliver service to their fellow citizens. The health service recruits idealists at the age of 20 and makes them cynics by the time they're 30. That's
25. Well, I mean, you know, I think you and I have spoken about this before. I think one of the biggest problems is the amount of student debt you get into as a medic, because, of course, it racks up. It's absolutely outrageous, the amount of money these young people are forced to pay out. What about the idea that we lock them into, say, 10 years of service, and for every year of service, we write off some of that debt, of those tuition fees? So, essentially, we underwrite the tuition fees over a period of time, but you have to then serve for a minimum duration.
Well, look, I don't actually think 10 years commitment is either enforceable or right. I do think the point you raise about student debt is an issue not just in medicine, but more generally in the university system. And that's a very serious issue that does need to be addressed. And I do agree that if people are supported through a professional qualification, some form of commitment is a reasonable quid pro quo to ask. But these are the kind of... You and I are having this discussion on TalkTV, which is great. Why doesn't the government sit down and talk about it?
Well, maybe you and I need to sit down with the junior doctors on behalf of the government and negotiate a pay settlement.
You might get the government to give you that commission. I'm not sure I will.
I really don't think so. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Stephen. Very good to talk to you. Stephen Dorrell, former Conservative Health Secretary.